CBS News senior political editor. And Steve, again, what did you make of the remarks? Certainly how they began, again, as so often they do with the president, off script.
Yeah, well, it's pretty clear he doesn't want to lose. And I think we are seeing what's going to happen if the court upholds this restraining order. I think we're going to see Donald Trump fight this thing as far as he can. This is a guy who, as we've seen throughout his career and his campaign, does not like to lose. And so I think this is a preemptive sort of strike by basically trying to work the refs, work the court, and suggest that politics has crept into this, and urging them to, quote, do the right thing, at least in his eyes. So we'll see how this all turns out. But if it doesn't work out in his favor, do not be surprised when you see him push back really hard.
You mentioned the idea of working the refs. It was something I discussed with our Jan Crawford earlier today, Steve. And to that end, it was apparent even last night as the Ninth Circuit heard the arguments that Donald Trump's campaign rhetoric, very specifically, is on the table here. It would seem perhaps that it might be a good time then to dial said rhetoric back, but we're not seeing that here.
No, we're not. And it's just really interesting that he says that the courts have gotten too political, but one of the reasons I think is partially, at least in this case, because of the things that he has said, and that's crept into the arguments that have been made, at least against this ban. And so, yeah, you would think that the playbook would suggest maybe quiet down on the rhetoric, but he's going full force on this, and again, do not be surprised if he continues this way if this decision does not work in his favor.
You know, we heard Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly essentially fall on a sword yesterday during testimony as it was specifically discussed the implementation of the ban itself. I was struck, though, as we just heard the president say he claims that he said he wanted to actually provide a month's notice before the ban was implemented and was talked out of it by someone. And then he said he actually dialed that back to a week, was talked out of it apparently again by someone. But it bears mentioning, during the campaign when he was asked about the announced plan to retake Mosul, he scoffed at any notion of ever providing any advance notice for specifically this reason, something he scoffed at again. What to make of the position he just claimed?
It sounds like the story's changing a bit, because if you remember in the beginning, it was we didn't want to give them any time to figure out a way around this ban. This is why we implemented it immediately. And if you saw what had happened in the first couple of weeks of this administration, it was, some would say, hastily signing these executive orders, pushing things as fast as possible, partially, I think, for political reasons, to show Americans that he was getting things done and that he was taking action on his campaign promises. But as we saw what happened, it seemed like they didn't fully think this through about maybe what the benefits would have been if they did hold off. And Kelly now is really sort of playing the good Marine, not to put a pun in there, but as a former Marine, he's taking the blame for this. I think that's what you're going to see. That's what you usually see cabinet secretaries do when the president screws something up. They're going to take the blame for it. But at the end of the day, Trump does have to bear some blame for this. As Truman used to say, right, the buck stops here. The president is the last person to say, let's push this through. He signed that executive order when it was signed. But I think the story has shifted just a little bit.
If nothing else, our Major Garrett referred to a time-honored tradition of the White House that is finally being respected here as it regards cabinet secretaries falling on swords. He also drove home a point here when he said, I've learned a lot in the last 2 weeks, and believe me, terrorism is a far greater threat than the people of this country understand, especially as it relates to the ban, again, on immigration from 7 Muslim-majority countries. We do know, first identified by the Obama administration, but we also know a ban that, had it been in place prior to September 11, 2001, would not have stopped any major terrorist attack on U.S. soil that has been committed since.
Right. So, you're talking about facts and Donald Trump in the same sentence. However, there probably is some truth to the fact that he is realizing how serious a threat terrorism is. But there's a debate to be had about his prescriptions to deal with that problem, right? And so I think what you're saying here is this ban is not necessarily the right prescription. That's the argument to be made. However, again, this is a campaign promise of his. And I think one thing that we've seen, at least in the beginning of this administration, is he is going to at least try to show Americans that he is keeping these promises. Whether they're the right prescriptions or not, that's the fight that Democrats and Republicans are going to have. That's the decision that Americans are going to make on whether these are successful prescriptions or not. But he can at least point to this and say, I am doing what I promised I would do as a candidate.
But so the Ninth Circuit is left to decide however racist or xenophobic or unconstitutional this may be. But as it regards political fallout here, Steve, isn't it fair to see what was just said there by the president in the context in which he said it and just see this as more fear-mongering?
Well, you could make that argument, and I think you could make the argument on the flip side too that if this doesn't go the Democrats' way, that this is going to continue to be a political landmine for the Republicans, and the fact that the Democrats will protest, continue to protest, and suggest exactly what you just suggested. So. You know, this is not, whatever happens with the Ninth Circuit, I think we can, first of all, predict that it's probably not going to end court-wise at that point. But secondly, it's definitely not going to end, no matter what happens, even if it gets to the Supreme Court, this will not end in terms of politics. And this is an extremely polarized country right now. Democrats are going to run with this if it doesn't work in their favor, and Trump and the Republicans will run with this if it doesn't work in their favor. And no matter what happens, we are going to be feeling the fallout politically from this for months to come.
Well, then, if we look at an aisle perhaps that has never seemed whiter, I want to get you out of here on this one, Steve. A group of moderate Democrats are now planning to meet with President Trump tomorrow. Moderate Democratic senators. What do you suppose is the hope for this meeting?
Well, first of all, the reality is Trump, I think, understands that he does need some Democratic support to get things done, especially in the Senate. There are still votes that require 60 votes in order to move forward on them, and that includes his Supreme Court pick, Neil Gorsuch. It includes things that involve spending money and taxes, for instance, tax reform or Obamacare. And so he's reaching out to these people, who, all of whom, by the way, are going to be running for re-election next year, all of whom are in states that Trump won handily. In fact, if you want to mention some of the names, John Tester, the Montana senator, Trump won that state by 20 points. Heidi Heitkamp, the North Dakota senator, Trump won by 36 there. And Joe Manchin in West Virginia, Trump won by 42 points there. So these are places that are heavily pro-Trump, or at least they were during this election. He thinks he might be able to sway these folks to at least work with him, and he needs some Democrats in order to get things done.
It would certainly seem to be the politically expedient thing for certain Democratic senators to do, if nothing else. Steve Chaggaris, as always, insight very much appreciated.
Thanks, Josh.